To keep the population of any country stable, a woman has to give birth to 2.1 children per medicine. You may not have to hear the right audience. In today's series, we will have a special discussion on how South Korea is falling unimaginable in the near future and why it is almost impossible to solve this problem. In the 1950s, South Korean women had an average of 6 children, but in the 1980s, that rate fell below 2. By the end of the year, the rate dropped to 0.72 per woman, the lowest in history. In the capital, Seoul, the rate is only 0.55, which means that half of the women do not give birth to a child by medication, while the other half gives birth to only one. If the fertility rate remains the same, 100 South Koreans will have only 36 children. After that, they will give birth to only 13 people when they grow up, and then those 13 will give birth to only 5 children. This means that within 4 generations, 100 South Koreans will be limited to 5. If we look at the current South Korean population pyramids, it is clear that there is only one 1-year-old baby among every 4 50-year-olds. Even though the fertility rate has been below the replacement for 4 decades, its effect was not seen immediately. South Korea's population and GDP are now at the highest point, and GDP is still growing, but the demographic crisis is such that it does not seem to have had much effect at first, but has suddenly started showing unimaginable effects. Now let's see what South Korea looks like in 2060, 35 years later. The demographic projection often uses 3 possible scenarios presented by the United Nations, and these are low fertility rates, moderate fertility rates, and high fertility rates. But in the past, all UN projections have proved to be very positive for South Korea. Between 2022 and 202, the fertility rate in South Korea fell to 8%. So we are using the latest low fertility rate landscape that has been the most accurate in the forecasts created. It is important to note that these are still projections and the future is uncertain. If this situation continues in South Korea, let's take a look at the level of South Korea's population in 2060. In 2060, the country's population will decline by 30%, which means that 6 million South Koreans will disappear in just 35 years. It will be the oldest country in human history. 1 in 2 South Koreans will be over 65 years of age. There will be only 1 out of 10 people under 25 and only 1 out of 100. Roads will be unexpectedly calm because there will be no children playing. The entire settlement will be vacant. Half of the population will be the elderly, who will either have to live alone or live in sheeped old age homes. Only a few people will be struggling to run the society. This crisis will bring a big problem. The biggest problem is economic collapse. At the age of 23, 40% of South Koreans over the age of 65 were living in poverty. But by 2060, the situation could worsen. South Korea now has a large pension fund of about $730 billion. It is one of the largest funds in the world. But after 2040, the fund will stop growing and it will end completely in the 2050s. Then in 2060, the working population will have to pay the pension of the elderly. In order to sustain this, about 2 or 3 workers will have to bear the cost of a pension old man. But even if all South Koreans over the age of 15 are to work by 2060, the same amount of youth will not be a combination for every elderly. This means that 3 young South Korean workers are needed to pay the same pension at that time. But at that time, due to the lack of the younger generation, there will be no more young people. So at that time, the elderly will be forced to work even at the age of 78. But sadly, they will not even get a job because by 2060, the South Korean economy will collapse. Normally, the size of a country's economy is linked to the size of its labor force. A large economy requires a lot of workers who produce and consume goods. Today, about 37 million people in South Korea are working age, which produces a 7 trillion GDP, but by 2060, the labor force will have technology progress will definitely increase individual production capacity, but South Korea's GDP in the 2040s, as in previous decades, continues at the same rate as in previous decades. There are some optimistic forecasts that the country may not start by 2050, but the UN's moderate fertility rate is based on the UN's moderate fertility rate scenario and is currently moving in that direction. No sign. Another major factor is science, technology, and innovation, where major achievements come from young and middle-aged people. The younger generation brings new ideas to contribute to the prosperity of the society. But when the number of working people decreases, the government's tax revenue also decreases. On the one hand, half of the population has to be taken care of by the elderly, and on the other hand, the government's income will be less. As a result, the government will have to shut down or cut basic services such as hospital social security and will not have enough money to invest in the future. This situation will be extremely critical. If we look at the social situation in South Korea, 20% of Koreans live alone right now, and 20% say they have no close friends or relatives. By 2060, 50 Koreans over the age of 70 will have no brothers or sisters, and 30% of Koreans will not even have children. At that time, young people between the ages of 25 and 35 will have only 5 copies of those who will have no brothers or sisters. The condition of the youths growing up in 2060 will be very dire. At that time, most of the schools and universities today will be almost deserted. Young people will focus on Seoul or other big cities to avoid loneliness. Small cities will be almost deserted. The rural areas will be completely finished. This problem is already seen in Japan, where more than 1 million homes have been destroyed. Even if the fall of South Korea tripled to 2.1 by a miracle, the country's population structure would look like a pyramid in 2060. Even then, in order to sustain the elderly above 65 years of age, there will be only 1.5 workers per person. That is, South Korea will have to go through a serious crisis in any case. If the right social policy is adopted for population growth, long-term improvement may be possible. For the first time in 9 years, the birth rate had increased by 3%. But in order to maintain this trend, South Korea must go in depth to study where it went wrong. After all, why is the situation so terrible? Normally, when society is rich, educated, and child mortality decreases, people decide to have fewer children. South Korea is embracing all these trends. South Korea was very rapidly free from poverty, but the process led to a kind of work culture and excessive competition. Although legally, the weekly working time is only 40 hours, but many workers are forced to work more than 52 hours. Even the government had proposed to extend the work limit to 69 hours. But South Korea's salary is relatively low. The dream of buying a house, especially in big cities, is not possible for many. Also, education is very expensive because families who want to teach their children in good universities should spend a lot on private tuition. Despite this, South Korea spends much less in family aid than other rich countries. Old cultural beliefs worsen the situation. It is almost impossible to start a family without getting married in South Korea. In children, infants born to unmarried women were the least 4.7%, 7% in the developed countries. In addition, the social expectation that men should be the main earner is mentally stressed. It is a personal decision to start a family or not. But many South Koreans are protesting. As a result, South Korean culture has created a very low birth rate. In fact, the collapse of the population is not just a vision of a future, and it is not limited to South Korea. The birth rate was 1.2 in Italy and Spain, at 1.4 in the United Kingdom, and 1.66 in the United States. The birth rate of 1.6 may look good, but after 4 generations, it reduces the number of new people by 60%. Similarly, the birth rate of 2 will reduce the population by 87%. But the birth rate is still declining, and there is no indication of sustainability or improvement. The most amazing thing is that many still do not understand the seriousness of this problem. In the last century, population growth was the main concern, but now it seems unnatural that we need more children. If it is seriously counted, the future looks so frightening that it is possible to believe. The low birth rate is not only a problem of labor shortage, but it is also a serious threat to our society, culture, wealth, and lifestyle. This century will be very disappointing if we do not address it seriously. This rapid change of population does not stop for anyone. We must be able to admit that this problem is ours. The audience must tell us in the comments what you think of today's series. Also, if you like today's series, don't forget to like and share and subscribe to our channel, and also click the bell icon with you so that you can get the information of the new video we upload first. For today, you will bring even more interesting information in another video. Until then, say goodbye.